Welcome to the commentary booth, where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play by play commentator, Jamie Upps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of colour commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by a film and TV producer who lists their favourite movie as American Gangster and favourite TV show as Game of Thrones. Welcome to the show, Casey Zeiders.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. I'm very excited for this. This was a fun series, or
Yeah,
has
my
been a fun series.
yeah, my pleasure to have you on. It's made total sense to have you join me for this episode since we're covering Apple TV's new sports documentary series, The Dynasty, covering the New England Patriots. With your history with the NFL Network, it was a no-brainer that you were the person to call.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, as you said, I spent about 8 years at the NFL Network, and now working freelance, still doing football documentaries as well. So yeah, I'm excited for us to talk about it, and I appreciate you leaning on my so-called expertise here.
And how is the sort of the freelance life treating you these days?
It's cool. It's definitely a different hustle than being somewhere where the NFL season. It's pretty routine. The draft is coming up, the combine's coming up, season's coming up, playoffs, everything like that. With being on the freelance, you have a kind of like a larger scale look at things. I was more planning month by month at the NFL, whereas this I can look at a full project and be like, hey, let's tell this story and take a year to do it. This documentary I'm working on right now, we've been in production for about 2 years on it, and it'll come out this year. So it did a lot longer form and a lot longer time do we have to put these together, which is nice.
And I imagine sort of a bit more flexibility creatively as well.
Oh yes, definitely a lot more flexibility with that as well, which is good, but also good and bad because we can tinker with this forever, and keep making changes and making changes. Whereas at the NFL they kind of do something a certain way and it's like here it's done, get it out there. This there's a billion chefs in there wanting to do everything different ways.
Yeah, you have that issue of the perfecting something when it's like, okay, we kind of just need to get it out, not.
We just need to get it done. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, on to the topic for this week, The Dynasty, a 10-part series featuring never before seen footage of the New England Patriots as they go from their 20-year journey from being a struggling franchise into a football dynasty. Um, at the time of recording, we've seen the first 4 episodes. There's obviously another 6 to come, but looks like they're releasing 2 a week, so it'll be wrapped up pretty quickly. From the first 4 episodes, how are you feeling about the series so far?
I'm actually really enjoying it. I went in with kind of zero expectations on it. A lot of times with documentaries, especially sports ones, I think we saw kind of the controversy around the Florida one that Netflix did recently. You don't really know what to expect, whether they're going to get the full story for a lot of these things and how much actual coverage they're going to do on a lot of it. But I'm really enjoying it. It feels very much like The Last Dance, the Bulls
Mhm.
one that came out recently. Like I'm shocked that they have the amount of footage that they do. Seeing Brady his rookie year in an apartment complex, like this is crazy stuff. Seeing him at parties playing pool, like I don't know. I didn't have a ton of expectations coming into it, and 4 episodes in, I'm hooked. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, like they have footage that I never expected to have, but then they also I've been blown away by the amount of people that were willing to sit down for interviews with this and really not hold anything back. They're really
Yeah.
candid about their thoughts of other people in the series and things that were happening at the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that to that same point, like you're worried, are they not going to get this voice? Are they not going to get that voice? I mean, they had the security guard that took the tape, when the Spygate happened. Like I thought that was really good, and they've done a really good job of um like showing those parallels and like using them as metaphors. Like they had him start off by talking about him being undercover and how he couldn't deal with the betrayal, and it ends with a Mangini betraying Bill,
Mhm.
and him kind of telling that story of betrayal, which I thought was, really interesting with how they did that, and with the people that they use. I think it's very easy when you're making documentaries and things like that to be like, hey, we've got Brady. Let's just throw him in everything. Like people would love this, you know, hearing the name Brady and hearing he's going to be in it. Everybody's going to tune in to watch it. They could have mailed it in and have Brady be, every single topic is about him. What I've really liked so far is that they've only used Brady for the very big moments and when they've needed to. It's kind of, other people telling the story. It's Dante Stallworth, it's Brewski, it's Vrabel, it's fans telling a story, it's this, security guard, it's all these people, and they're getting to this moment, and then it's like, here's this massive moment, then we hear Brady, tell about how big it is, and then it's back to everybody else. And I think that they pick and choose Brady's spots very, very well, so it doesn't feel like he's forced into everything.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, they could have just gone, Brady, that's all. We just need his perspective. It could have been all about his rise, but they've actually
Exactly.
focused on the whole
Yeah.
team, which is very nice.
And people would have watched it if it was just only Brady and only Brady talking about it. But I think this, like you said, we're getting more candid answers, and we're getting everybody's perspective of exactly what this dynasty was from all points of view.
And I think as someone that sort of tangentially watched NFL early on when Patriots were on the rise, like I for me, like my memory is always Brady as their quarterback. Like I very barely remember like Bledsoe even being there. I
Hmm.
knew that obviously Brady replaced him because of an injury, but I didn't know just how violent and potentially life-threatening that injury was.
Yeah, that injury was no joke, and that was one of the things that caught my attention. Is it's easy to forget how hard people. I mean, they still hit hard, but how hard they hit back then too, and
Mhm.
how hard quarterbacks got hit. Like you would never seen a quarterback get cleaned out like that in today's game on the sideline, and the hit that they showed where Brady, where his helmet gets launched flying, like these QBs used to take some crazy hits, and I honestly didn't. I knew there was a bad injury, but I didn't know how close to life threatening it was for him either. And to that whole injury, I think, like to the football aspect of it, I think it speaks volumes to the kind of person that Bledsoe was. Like Bledsoe was the franchise. He already went to the Super Bowl, and he gets hurt and he's supposed to come back, and he could have easily been an issue the entire time. He could have been an issue after he replaced in the AFC Championship game. And they touched on it a little bit, but them Brewski saying that was the start of the Patriot way really stuck out to me. That was really interesting.
Yeah, everybody was like team first. Yeah, like you said,
Hmm.
yeah, $100 million
And
quarterback. He could have easily come in and been like, "No, this is my job. I want my job back," and really
yeah,
gone to the media with that message.
exactly. And Bill giving was it Lawyer Malloy his hotel room? That was another team first kind of thing that I'd never heard that story before, which was really really cool.
Okay, that's interesting. That yeah, someone that worked inside the NFL obviously worked closely with a lot of these teams. Like for you to still be hearing stories that are brand new is
Yeah,
a, a testament to the quality of this documentary.
yeah. Honestly, that's why I was so into it. I worked at the NFL, and you hear a lot of these stories, and I've been a fan of the game for a long time. So I think that I have a pretty decent knowledge of the game. But that's why these documentaries are so important and why they're so good, and why I've enjoyed this one so much is throughout all four episodes there were things that I hadn't learned or hadn't heard of before that are so intimate inside of that locker room that we're getting such a unique look at one of the greatest dynasties ever, which is very very cool in my opinion.
Had you heard the hazing issues that Brady was put through in his rookie
Uh,
season?
Not to the extent that they did, or that they started talking about. I mean, I think anytime you're around players, you hear about some hazing that they went through their rookie year and stuff like that, but they don't really get too much into it. I wish they had some photos or some videos of his feet.
Mhm.
That would have been great to see.
Yeah,
I'd never heard of that prank, but that's a really good one.
that is a great prank, and yet, yeah, that I think that's the one thing that was missing from that story.
Yeah,
Just even
just
just like a
seeing it. Yeah,
Polaroid of his feet would have been great.
yep, absolutely. Just seeing that. Um, but another thing that I, wanted to hit on that you talked about with how good this documentary has been is um, the Patriots. They're known as this evil empire. They even talk about it before we were the evil empire, all the stuff like that. So you're trying to tell this story where everybody going into this, unless they're a Patriots fan, does not like this subject, essentially. They appreciate the greatness, but a lot of them have stories about Brady or Bill killing their team. They're angry about Spygate or Deflategate or whatever it may be. What I thought that they did an amazing job with is right from the start, you felt like the Patriots were underdogs again. And that's how
Mhm.
they were at the beginning of it. And I thought that that was a very difficult thing to do, and they did it very well. Like getting people back on board with Brady, showing Brady him in his rookie year and him being a person. I mean, even Brady's interviews I thought were great. Brady's dropping F bombs left and right. And to me, like, I'm glad that they do that because it makes Brady feel like a person
Yeah, he's
instead
not
of
just a
being this.
robot.
He's not this robot that, like, I think people thought he was throughout this whole time. No, Brady's this guy that plays pool and outdrinks the offensive lineman. And so you get into that, like, oh, they're underdogs again. And then when the Spygate stuff hit, you immediately flip to, oh yeah, I don't like this team. And it started showing their attitude again. And I thought that they did a very good job of highlighting that, where the kind of light switch that flipped between that dynasty there.
Yep. And yeah, on that humanizing aspect, they talk about like he loved playing Tech Mobile and like
Hmm.
was incredibly competitive and would
Yeah,
throw controllers through walls and things like that, and
yeah.
buying his first house from one of the other players.
Who among us hasn't, played some old Nintendo with friends with a couple beers and thrown a controller, you know?
Yep. And like you said, it goes all the way back. Like it goes right back to the January 21st, 1994, when they announced that Robert Kraft has purchased the team, and that
Hmm.
whole sort of local boy does good storyline. Like it's really insightful for someone that, like I said, really only knows from the Brady era on. So it was great to sort of get all of that background first, and now we're moving into parts of the story that I know.
Yeah, they did. They did a really good job with that. It's always tough as producers um, to kind of find that fine line. You want to educate the viewer, but you also don't want to make them feel stupid or bore them. Like me going into it with, a little bit more football knowledge, like I wasn't bored getting caught up with some of this stuff. Like they were presenting things to me that I didn't necessarily know. And for people that don't know Robert Kraft's story, it's an awesome story. That whole thing where he's like, I'm gonna, own the team one day, and just started buying the land in the stadium. And that's ultimately how he bought the team, which is a very awesome story. And then also like understanding where Bill came from before that in Cleveland and his decision with Bernie Kosar. I think by, really highlighting that and spending so much time helps the viewer also understand his dilemma with going with Brady with Bledsoe again, and whether he was repeating everything again, or this was going to be a good decision, or what have it. But I thought they did a really good job of jumping around where I mentioned the Last Dance earlier. I think sometimes the Last Dance got kind of confusing where it would jump around, and I've seen some other documentaries where it's kind of tough to follow where it's jumping around. But this, it felt like there was a meaning behind where it was going to take each part of the story to.
Yeah, yeah. I think every episode has a very clearly defined.
Hmm.
This is the thread that we're pulling on, but then it still connects to the next episodes.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, they did a great job with the cliffhangers, with getting you ready for the next episode. And like all the intense moments, I thought that they really hit those. You want to hit on every topic, but like they skimmed through the Patriots versus the Panthers Super Bowl. They skimmed through the Eagles Super Bowl. Those weren't the big moments. the Rams Super Bowl, they're hitting on that for a while. The tuck rule, they hit on that for a while. So it was like, I thought that they were able to accurately show, like, okay, these all things happen, but this is really the catalyst of why everything's happened. And then these little things happen. And then here's the big reason of why you're watching this.
Yep. You mentioned the tuck rule. Was that hit? Did that change the rule?
Yes.
I
Yes.
thought so because I looked at it. I was like, that's 100% a fumble as someone
Yeah.
just casually watching.
Yeah, and that's a game that I was 11 or 12. The Super Bowl actually that the Rams won against the Titans a couple years before is about when I really remember like getting into football and remembering everything that I'm watching and digesting it. That game against the Raiders is a game that I remember everything about that game. I remember I was staying at a friend's house. We were supposed to be in bed already. We were past bedtime watching this game. I remember everything about that because even then at 11 years old, I knew that this was going to be a crazy moment. And I even remember at 11 years old being like, that's a fumble. I mean,
Mhm.
he tucks it into his hand. He was not intending to throw that ball whatsoever. And, even Brady to this day admits that it was a fumble, but that's not how the rule was. And, it changed the course of a lot of things. Um, I did a pretty cool piece a couple years ago about what if things in the NFL, and one of them was what if the tuck rule had gone the Raiders' way,
Mhm.
and I honestly believe that would have changed the entire trajectory of the Patriots. I think if they call that a fumble, probably maybe the Raiders win that Super Bowl, whatever, but I don't think that, I think you can make a case that they probably go back to Bledsoe the next year because
Mhm.
Brady doesn't have the clout. They lose on a fumble by him. Kraft, was already, as we saw in the documentary, Kraft was already upset that they were benching Bledsoe. And so without any clout to Bledsoe's name, this would be another year of Bill not really doing anything there. I think he's kind of forced and has to go back to Bledsoe, and a lot of people don't realize this, but after they won that Rams Super Bowl, they actually missed the playoffs the next year with Brady. And so they don't win that Super Bowl. They miss the playoffs the next year. Like, you're potentially talking about Bills being fired the next year if they
Mhm.
don't win that Super Bowl. Potentially Brady's not a thing. Bill's fired. Maybe he goes to Indianapolis and coaches Peyton Manning, and Peyton Manning's who we talk about. There's all these crazy scenarios that come out, but that play is so pivotal to the next 23 years of the game of football. It's crazy how that, you can look at that one play right there that should have been called a fumble that, basically shaped the entire NFL for 2 decades.
Yeah, like like you said, the whole sort of trajectory, the vision for what the Patriots would become has to
Hmm.
change. Like, yeah, we go back to the previous quarterback. Tom gets traded, goes somewhere else potentially. Like
Yeah.
everything changes on that one play, and
Everything changes if that's ruled a fumble. Maybe
yeah,
Gruden's not fired. Al
Mhm.
Davis was upset because of the call. I mean, it's not like Gruden can do much. It was reviewed. It was under 2 minutes, but that's partly that entire loss was why Gruden lost his job. So maybe Gruden stays there, wins a ring or two there, doesn't go to Tampa Bay to win a ring. A lot of things change.
Yeah. I did find it funny when even Tom was like, "Yeah, I fumbled that."
Yeah, I think it took him a lot of years to come around to it, and now he freely admits, yeah, that was a fumble, which is great. I think there's something to be said about two of the greatest quarterbacks in Tom and Peyton, and how they're able to make fun of themselves and make light of their careers. I mean, Michael Jordan is a completely different person with how he looks at his career and kind of how he does media. So I think it's really cool how Peyton and Tom really embrace the media like that.
And then on the Drew Bledsoe situation, in your opinion, do you think they overpaid Bledsoe too early?
Um, it's tough to say that because you also have to remember that he took him to the Super Bowl. Like, he took
Mhm.
him to the Super Bowl. He was there for long. He was still a pretty young quarterback. I mean, even after he left there, he still got paid. He still got paid by the Cowboys. He got paid by the Bills. Like, he had a lot of clout around the league. And so and it's not like you're predicting a 6-round pick is going to be, who Tom Brady ultimately became. It's a league where you're DOA if you don't have a quarterback, and even at that time. So, you can never fault a team, in my opinion, for paying what they have there while they have a quarterback. It's just, it worked out the way it did, and I think it's something to be said about Jackie McMillan mentioned it in that, just how much balls that he has to bench $100 million quarterback. We saw, you never see that. I mean, I think the only other big example you can really, really pinpoint was Russell Wilson when they signed Matt Flynn right before that. The Seahawks, and Russ as a rookie outplayed him in the preseason, and they went with Russ. But aside from that, like, the money talks with who's playing typically, especially at the quarterback spot.
Yep. Yeah, I guess looking back in hindsight now, yeah, they probably could have saved that money and invested it elsewhere. But yeah, at the time, the
Yeah.
199th pick that they picked purely just because he was available, they didn't actually need a quarterback at the time.
Yeah.
Just paid off big time.
Exactly. And exactly to that point, there was, however, we've heard about the stories of the amount of quarterbacks that were taken before. And they even said in the documentary, they're like sitting there in the 6th round without a need at quarterback. They just felt he was the best player there. So they said, why not?
And on the players as well, the signing Randy Moss was a big part of these first 4 episodes. Who would be an equivalent trade in today's NFL, in your opinion?
Oh, man. Let's see. I was going to say, like, Justin Jefferson right now, because it sounds like he's kind of pushing his way out of Minnesota and wanting to get paid. But I don't know if, where Moss was at that time, he was kind of disgruntled is what, the talk about him was around the league. Maybe like AJ Brown getting traded to the Eagles, and the Eagles going on that run last year with AJ Brown and going to the Super Bowl. Maybe that's probably maybe the closest parallel to something like that. But even that, like, I wouldn't consider like AJ Brown a disgruntled receiver. I don't know. That's I don't know if we have too many examples. Antonio Brown, when he was around, would always be the classic example of that, who was also with Brady, who, kind of vouched for him everywhere that he went. But it's just like Randy Moss was unique because he was still a Hall of Fame talent at that point. It's just he wanted out of Oakland. They were losing, they weren't going anywhere with him, and he needed to go somewhere that, had Brady and Bill's clout that could, that's exactly what Moss needed. He needed somebody that had bigger clout than he did to kind of reel him in. And what sucks is we didn't get a lot of Moss and Brady, and in the documentary and in real life. That was one of the things that I marked, is that I wish we would have gotten more Moss and Brady, because that year was so much fun with them. There's a story that I know that they didn't talk about it in it. I'm pretty sure, and I might be mixing them up, but that year that Moss was going crazy, T.O. was having a great year as well. And they basically were stat watching each other the whole year. And so there was a game, I'm pretty sure it was earlier in the day, T.O. scored 4 touchdowns in a game. And it was that night game that they kept showing against Buffalo, that the Patriots were playing. I think they showed a touchdown or 2 of Randy Moss. Randy Moss scores 4 touchdowns that game. And from what I had heard was when Tom came into the building that day, Randy asked Tom if he had heard how many touchdowns T.O. scored that day. And Brady just looked at him and said yes. And they knew right away that he was going to score 4 touchdowns as well.
They knew the job.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, I wish we would have gotten more stuff, more stories about the two of them and kind of how well they worked together, because it was just unreal to watch. We saw it the 18-1 year, and then after this we're going to get the injury, and so we lose an entire year. of Brady and Moss. And then I believe it's the following years when things started getting bad and the wheels fell off the wagon. But we didn't get as much Brady and Moss as I think we should have.
Yep. But I guess we've also got the Gronkowski
Yep.
pairing to look forward to in the coming episodes as well.
Yeah, the tight ends coming in are going to be really exciting. I think, what's very cool about, and I think they're slowly starting to hint at it, is how these Patriot teams evolved so much. At the beginning, they were a defensive heavy team and they ran the ball. Then they get Randy Moss and they're throwing the ball everywhere around. And then they get these tight ends and it changes the way offenses play across the whole league. And, people are looking for the next Gronk and Aaron Hernandez and running these two tight end personnels that we hadn't really seen in a while and used how they were. So it's going to be really cool to see that aspect of it, but also it'll be interesting to see how deep they go into how much of the players there knew about Aaron off the field
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
how deep they'll go into that. Because those are gonna be tough things that we're gonna want to hear about. And were there any signs that they thought? Were there any were people afraid of him around the place? What that's going to be very interesting to see what happens, what they say with that.
And with how open they have been so far, I have full faith that they are going to dig into that topic
Yeah.
pretty deeply.
And on that same note, I actually wrote down that when they asked Bill about the Spygate, I was just picturing myself in that producer's role and how hard that question must have been. And full Bill response, I've already spoken enough about this. I don't think there's anything more we can touch on. But just how tough that question probably was, not wanting to screw everything up with Bill, the entire documentary being around needing Bill for that. So I'd have to give my props to the producers for it. And like you said, they're not afraid to talk about each of these topics and ask about them at the very least, which is very awesome. I do have to commend them for that.
I wonder if, I'm not sure how it would work as a producer role. Is that something you would leave towards the end of your time with Bill? Like, we would get everything else we need, and then we'd be like, oh, and obviously we have to ask you about this at the end.
Potentially. I think you'd want a strategy to it for sure. Maybe it's in the middle of what you're talking about, right before lunch or something like that. So you get those questions in, then let him go take a break, and then bring him back in for some more conversations, a little bit lighthearted.
Let him cool down a little bit.
Exactly, something like that. I think you definitely go in with a strategy, though.
Are you a trading card collector or a fan of Australian pro wrestling? If so, you're not going to want to miss out on the limited edition Australian wrestling cards. Each set includes 50 packs of 10 cards, including some of the country's top wrestling talents like Robbie Eagles, Shane Haste, Madison Eagles, Hartley Jackson, and they have Shaza McKenzie listed, although she is not a favorite. The Velocities, and a lot more. There's wrestlers, referees, announcers, commentators that are featured, giving you a full appreciation of the Australian independent scene. The cards sold out a lot faster because cards are hot right now, but you can order your Australian wrestling cards now at Pario Magazine. That's PARIO magazine.com.au/AUS WRES cards. Follow Australian Wrestling Cards on social media at AusResCards for updates. Join the hundreds of fans who have already discovered the excitement of Australian wrestling cards.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, as a kicker in college yourself, the Adam Vinatieri snow game kick. How hard would that have been?
Oh man, and I actually wasn't a kicker in college. I was in high school. I went to college to kick, but I didn't ultimately end up kicking. But that was something I actually wrote down as well. The one to win it in overtime was short. Still very difficult in the snow and everything. That 45-yarder in the snow to tie it is absolutely insane to me that he drilled that kick. Like, I don't think people understand how hard and how soggy a football gets when it's wet and cold. It would have been the equivalent of him kicking a cinder block, basically 45 yards.
Mhm.
And like you said, there was no way to clear off. He just kind of, brushed his foot there and was like, all right, F it, and drilled it. And for me, like, I always, like, Justin Tucker is probably the most skilled kicker ever. But to me, Adam Vinatieri will always be the greatest kicker ever because of the kicks that he made in those situations like that. I mean, everybody knows his amount of game-winning kicks, but when you factor in the conditions that he kicked a lot of those in, so many of those were snow games or wet games or windy in Foxborough in that stadium. It, just like Ty Law said in that, they need Adam Vinatieri's shoe put on the front of a car
Yep.
so he can
Yeah,
be
like
memorialized like that. Yeah, just right there.
yeah, for him to be kicking constantly in Boston, middle of winter,
Yeah,
like it's not like someone in California or Arizona, like nice perfect condition.
exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing I wrote down was the great insight into Tom Brady's mindset and how much that mindset is needed to become a dominant champion. Like they ask him what his mindset was after Bledsoe came back, and his quote was, "I ain't giving this shit back." Like
Hmm.
to just be so focused and determined on, no, I've taken this spot now. If you want it back, you have to really earn this spot back.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between like a Hall of Fame athlete and just another pro athlete in the game. I mean, once you get to that point, everybody's extremely talented. Everybody's there. Everybody's in the NFL or the NBA for a reason. It's those ones that are extra crazy, those MJs, those Kobe's, the Brady's, all these people that have, the Manning, all these people that have that extra switch in there where uber competitive. They're not going to lose whether it's a Tecmo Bowl game or a Week 4 game or in the NBA game number 31 out of 82 in a season. I think that's where it really separates a good player from a Hall of Fame player, is that mental mindset, that competitiveness, that Mamba mentality, however you want to describe it. And Brady, we've seen it his entire career, that competitiveness. Aside from now Patrick Mahomes, there's not another player you wanted to see with the ball in their hands at the end of the game. That was an automatic score pretty much every time Brady had the ball.
Yep. Yeah, and that idea of being a perfectionist that both
Hmm.
he and Bill were. They were like football junkies. They were constantly learning about researching the other teams, trying to
Yeah,
increase their own skills, and just always pushing to be that little bit better every game.
yeah, exactly. And that's where you get the best answers out of Bill these days. I think you see it when that Spygate happened. He kind of flipped. He was a little bit more personable before that, and now he's kind of guarded and really short with his answers. But you can get him talking if you bring up a question about some obscure rule that he's letting time waste, or a thing that a punter did or something like that. These his mind just thinks differently, and exactly that, he's this football junkie that all his that goes through his brain is this next loophole, this next advantage that they can win a punt rep or whatever it may be. And that's what makes Bill Bill.
Even that snow game, they went out and they cleared the bare minimum that they had to. They left as much snow on the field
Hmm.
as they could, knowing they were playing a
Yeah.
California team.
Yep. And that's another thing I think is highlighted throughout, is that the Patriots walk the line of, is this is this cheating? Is this legal? Is this, you know, ethical? Whatever it may be, they walk that line, that entire time, and that's part of winning. Those minuscule differences are the reason why they would win those tight games. I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, there's like following the rules to the letter of the law, and then there's following the rules in the spirit of the game. Like
Yeah.
the
Yep.
snow was the
Exactly.
first one. Knowing that the referees are not going to make a
Mhm.
bunch of calls in the Super Bowl, so they're really like pushing up on all the receivers and everything like that. I was like, this is the first signs of what ultimately led to Spygate and
Exactly.
Deflategate.
Mhm. Yeah. What can we get away with, basically? But it's funny you brought up Mike Martz. That guy's still a little bit salty about losing that game, huh?
Oh yeah.
And what's crazy is, just like, and they did the parallels to that, the Giants Super Bowl is 99 out of 100 times that Rams team probably smokes the Patriots, and 99 times out of 100 that Patriots team probably smokes the Giants. And we just happen to watch that one time where, the
That one
defense
freak
wins
moment.
out. Yep, exactly.
I also loved, what did I read down? All of the like ESPN hosts and Sports Center hosts and reporters and things. I was like, as someone that watched, pardon the interruption, Around the
Mhm.
Horn, watching all of those people like as their young selves, I was like, this is crazy to see all of this
Oh
old
yeah,
footage.
I got a great laugh when we saw Scott Van Pelt with hair in there.
Yep.
That was great. I'd always like, one of my favorite things was like the first thing I wrote down is I just love old NFL footage. Whether it's like you said, you see the old ESPN personalities, you see some old footage. I just did a
Really, really
project
big pads and stuff.
big pads, yeah, everything like that. We just did this Dion thing recently, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, but when Deion Sanders got drafted, he had an interview with Andrea Kramer, and this is in 1989. And Andrea Kramer's still around, doing her thing today. And so it's funny to see, even back in the 80s, some of these people that we still watch today getting their start back then. It's really cool to see.
Uh, and we mentioned there's 6 episodes to come. We've sort of touched on the Aaron Hernandez and the Deflategate. What other topics should people be looking out for in these coming episodes, in your opinion?
Um, I think obviously we're going to get the injury next, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how Brady dealt with that. And also the Patriots won 10 games with Matt Castle that next year. They missed the playoffs, but I think a lot of people forget that they won 10 games with Matt Castle and probably should have made the playoffs that year. So that will be interesting. How the Moss situation ended is going to be interesting because that got really ugly towards the end. Obviously, the tight ends. I'm so interested to hear about everything to do with Aaron Hernandez and just anything Gronk. If there's a camera on Gronk, we're going to end up getting some quality TV. So that'll be great. But I think the two biggest things that I'm most excited for is the quarterbacks being drafted that are coming up. We're getting Jimmy G. We're gonna have Ryan Mallett. We're gonna have Jacoby Brissett. The Brian Hoyer time when he would, get some starts. So we're going to start seeing some of the cracks in the foundation, and where kind of Brady loses his trust in Bill, maybe Kraft. I'm very. That's the big thing that I'm very interested in hearing about is when these quarterbacks start coming in and Brady's reaction to it and kind of the team's reaction to it. And then the other big one that I'm interested in, I hope that they include it in there, and that's why it's coming out now, is I hope they touch on Bill leaving, because I think I don't think anybody really thought that it would happen. Obviously it would happen eventually, but it just felt like he was going to be there until he didn't want to be there, and it sort of felt like his time was over now, and he wasn't pushed out, but he was pushed out, and so I hope that that's covered as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing those cracks form and the rift start
Hmm.
to form in that Patriots way, where they start to disintegrate that, and then everyone goes their own separate ways.
Yeah, and I'd like to see how they view Tom while he's in Tampa, because it seemed like Tom had a chip on his shoulder, and he wanted to prove that he was going to win without Bill, and did it. And so I'll be very interested to see if Kraft maybe is regretting that during that time, or just kind of the feelings inside that front office are while they're watching the Bucks go win one.
Yeah, because I imagine they were looking at that being like, oh, we maybe could have had another
Yeah,
championship.
that could have been another one to close it out.
I also love how much they dig into Boston sports fandom as well.
Hmm.
Those guys are crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, those people are insane there. And that's why I really enjoyed at the beginning where they had all the fans in there. And I think we can listen to athletes talk all day, but until you hear fans painted up in their super fan gear and talking about how they've had season tickets since they were kids and their parents had them and their grandparents had them and stuff like that, these are generations of Boston fans that were invested into this team. And so I always think that those are the best perspectives to get.
And yeah, like for them to go to all of these Foxborough games and sit in
Hmm.
the snow in the middle of winter, and I think it definitely helped Tom that they were underdogs in those first few seasons, because like Boston sports fandom can be pretty savage at times, and I think if they were expecting to win, he could have copped a much harder ride than he did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings up a very good point about Boston sports kind of as a whole during that time. Um you had the Red Sox, who were in the middle of their curse and ultimately, break that around that same time, and were known as underdogs. The Patriots were underdogs. The Bruins weren't very good, if I remember correctly, during that time. So a lot of those teams were, Boston wasn't title town or whatever that we kind of know it as then. And so they were all kind of underdogs. And as the Patriots started to get better, the Red Sox started to get better, Bruins, the Celtics formed their big three, and they went from kind of underdogs to, that expected to win. And I think that's when we start seeing, the hatred across fan bases towards them, and kind of loud Patriots fans that we know today start being formed, around that Spygate era time, when they flipped from not being underdogs to being the evil empire or title town, however they want to call themselves.
Yep. So then, if the series is to continue beyond the New England Patriots, aside from the obvious one, the Kansas City Chiefs at the moment, what other teams or sports would you sort of look to see explored?
Oh man, that's a good question. See, like, football is tough because the only team you would talk about there is the Patriots. Um, I think you could do it for Alabama. I think, their huge dynasty would be great. I would like to see it for, if we're going to do college football, during USC's kind of run in the early 2000s. Reggie Bush and Pete Carroll and Matt Leinart and all those guys. I think that would be a fun one if they have footage at that time. Let's see. I don't. Aside from, the Patriots and the Chiefs, like, it's tough because you want some sort of polarizing team, and I don't know if we've really had many polarizing teams aside from them.
Mhm.
Unless we look at, groups of years of maybe like college football, where, I think there'd be some segments that you could do that would work there.
Yep. I think the Miami Heat could be an interesting one, and like
Yep.
them being like a
Yeah.
struggling team, and then getting LeBron and everything
Hmm.
changes.
Yeah, like a Heat culture one, because, I think, they were good, they were decent before that, Alonzo Mourning and years like that, and then they get Dwayne Wade, and that kind of sets them forward, and obviously LeBron coming there, and after that, after even LeBron left, it still was that Heat culture where Jimmy Butler comes in, all these people come in, and it's kind of like a way of winning. Um, and yeah, I would agree with that. Heat culture, Patriot way, like, you need one of those polarizing slogans or sayings or something that makes you remember a certain team. And so that's why there's not many teams like that.
That, and they changed basketball as well, where it became like the super team
Yeah.
mentality as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think we've always had super teams in basketball. You look at, Bird
Yeah,
and
the
Russell and
Celtics.
McHale and Kareem and Magic and all these people. I think that super teams have always been there, but they became more prevalent later on. And again, that's kind of where the Patriots, or where the Celtics started. Boston started going up as well, as they formed their super team there, with the Celtics, and so there's parallels to back to Boston as well.
For me, another one that I would like to see explored too, from an Australian perspective, is the rugby league team, the Melbourne Storm, who were a new team. They were added to the National Rugby League competition. They struggled for a little while there, and then eventually became this dominant force who were later found to be breaching the salary cap, and because of that, they were actually stripped of 2-year worth of previous championships, and now they've had to sort of rebuild, and they've come back as now a formidable force again. So I think there is a nice arc to that storyline as
Yeah,
well.
that sounds really interesting. I know nothing about it, but I'm in on that story already. Let's make that one happen.
Yeah, and with the NRL going to Vegas this week as
Yeah,
well, so there's a nice potential to, hey, Hollywood, pay attention. These are the teams
yeah,
to look for. I guess you've also got the South Sydney Rabbitohs, who were a dominant team early in their foundations, eventually were kicked out of the NRL because they reduced the team sizes. And then Russell Crowe bought the team and got them back in the NRL. So there's lots of NRL stories that just haven't been explored
yeah.
outside of Australia.
That's interesting. So, with us talking about that and me knowing nothing about it, then who would be the Tom Brady parallel over there?
So in the Melbourne Storm team, it would be Cameron Smith, who was their like hooker, 5'8", like basically their quarterback. He controlled all of the plays and everything, and he's that person that was kind of come in as people were looking at like, oh, who's this guy? And then he became this crazy dominant force that everybody hated because he was such a niggly player. He'd get under people's skin. At one point, an opposition player's shoe came off in the game, and he grabbed it and just launched it into the crowd so that the guy had to run off the field to get a new shoe. Like just little stuff like that, where it's like, I hate this guy, but he knows what he's doing. He's very smart.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be a good comparison. I mean, I think we've all had those moments watching Brady play where, who go run up and talk to a ref after the play, or, do one of Brady's quirky things on the field that just anger you so much. So we can definitely relate to that for sure.
Yep. So yeah, that's the Dynasty New England Patriots. In terms of a rating, what would you give the first 4 episodes of this documentary?
Um, man, I was really impressed by it. I would say 9 out of 10, eight and a half, something like that. The way I also judge things like that is basically by my wife meter and about whether she finds excitement out of it. And I turned that on, and she was hooked. There's like you said, it brings you along for people that aren't as knowledgeable, but also tells deeper stories for somebody like me that knows a bit more. And they keep it very intense and only kind of highlight the important moments. And my wife Emily was locked in watching all 4 episodes. And so when it comes to sports, I also like to kind of judge it by that sort of meter. And she enjoyed it as well. So I'm in there 8, 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave this one 5 out of 5 because I thought it was fantastic. I was blown away by the depth and
Hmm.
the candidness. Like I did not
Yeah.
expect them to be so open and sort of just brutal about it. Like Bledsoe basically saying that what they did was a horrible thing.
Yep.
People saying like, "Yep, no, he had to go," and it's like, "Oh, okay." I did not expect them to be that harsh
Yeah.
and forthcoming.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us back to my initial point is when we get these football documentaries, you don't know what to expect and you don't know how candid they're going to be. And they could have just been, very face level and surface level and had Brady say, hey, this is what happened, and people would have watched it. But the fact that they went so in depth and were so candid and, back to, again, seeing Brady, that I don't like, I've never seen that footage of Brady his rookie year, like during training camp in this, Thai law owned apartment or condo that they had. Like that is awesome footage to see. seeing Brady around the facility, seeing, young Vrabel, young Brewski, like that stuff was really awesome to see. And exactly like you said, I don't think it would have been as good if they weren't as candid or had the footage that they did. It's just made it so entertaining the entire time.
And I'm not sure if you know, but do you know how involved the NFL and the NFL Network were in producing this? Were they sort of just licensing
Uh,
footage and that was it?
My guess is that they were probably involved a decent amount, just because of the amount of footage that they have in it. I'm currently working on a quarterbacks documentary right now, and we're obviously using a lot of NFL footage, and we have them on as an executive producer with us because of the amount of films footage we have. So I would imagine that they probably have a similar setup where they're executive producers on it. They have Roger in it. We have Roger in ours as well. So when there's Roger in the pieces, the NFL, has a little bit more guidelines on how things are being used and kind of more final say on stuff. But yeah, I would imagine that they're, I don't think that they're telling them how to make any of it. But I think they're signed on as executive producers and probably a little bit more than just providing footage for them.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just thinking, like, yeah, maybe if they were like very hands on, it could have become very
No,
sterile, but for it to not be
yeah,
like that is
exactly, and that's why I don't think that they're super hands-on because it's not a NFL like propaganda piece by any means. It's very much just about their stories. So I think it's probably a lot of giving them footage, letting them use it how they need. They probably will watch it before they probably did watch all the episodes, and if there's anything that made them look the NFL look too bad, then they would have pushed back. But I think it's probably similar to ours where, they're lending us the footage, just want to take a look at how it's being used and just kind of letting us do it on our own.
awesome. All right. We'll keep an eye out for your documentary later this
Yeah,
year and get you back
coming
to chat
out
about that.
in next at the start of next football season on Amazon Prime. Evolution of the Black Quarterback. It's going to be a 3-part series, maybe 4-part. We'll see. But right now, a 3-part series on the evolution of the black quarterback in the NFL. Starting from a guy named Fritz Pollard that a lot of people don't really know or have ever heard of him. He was actually a quarterback around 1918.
Oh, wow.
And not only was he a quarterback, he also owned a team, which is, pretty much unheard of for an African-American gentleman back then. So we start with him. We go through the years, the Warren Moons, the Randall Cunninghams, James Harris, Doug Williams, all the way up to today's game and the draft class that we just saw last year with Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud. And Michael Vick is our host, and he kind of takes us through a journey of learning about all these different quarterbacks. So definitely a piece that I'm very, very excited about, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll definitely get you back to chat about that. But
Sweet.
otherwise, thank you for joining me on the episode, and thank you to everyone for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow Casey on Twitter at the Zeiders, and you can follow me on social media at JamApps Media and at Pario Magazine. Again, thank you, Casey, for jumping on, and good luck with your documentary later this year.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks everybody for watching.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of Jamie Apps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/Jamie Apps Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.